Our weekly reading, Nitzavim, it presents us an image of a very large crowd. It paints this picture of this community standing and listening to the words of Moshe. Remember, they're right back to where they used to be, at the threshold of the land of Israel. And Moses speaks to them, interestingly, of course, in Hebrew in plural terms, and he speaks to the whole crowd, and he explains what this covenant is really like. God made a covenant with them, and he starts listing people. In Deuteronomy 29, verses 9 through 11 that we read, he even starts listing people like category by category. He says they're elders, they're zakenim, they're chiefs of tribes and heads of family clans. He says the heads of the mishpachot are there. So then he says there are wives, there's nashim, there's children, and there are even sojourners, gerim, as we read the Torah, who decided to live with Israelites, even workers who carry wood and workers who chop wood and carry water. There's all kinds of people that are standing in front of Moshe, and they're all a part of this moment. Now, everyone is included before God, and this is a very diverse, yet it is a united community. You know, it's possible to have a community that's diverse and united. We don't have to be all the same. So you just read the list of all these people. These are people of different social status and standing and all sorts of things, yet they're right there. They have one God. There are several peculiar phrases in Hebrew that caught my eye as I was rereading this passage this week, and the text switches right here between masculine plural and masculine singular pronoun you. Sometimes if you read Torah in Hebrew, you notice this. In English, you kind of gloss it over. You don't realize it's there, but in Hebrew, it's right there. And so Moses begins with Atem Nitzavim, you stand. Okay, that's how the passage begins. And then he mentions all these types of people that I just recounted, and then he gives us a purpose statement. The reason why you stand here it says Le'avricha bivrit, to enter into the covenant. You stand here so that you can enter into the covenant. You don't just become peripherally associated with the covenant. I realize maybe that's how it is for some people, but you actually enter into it. And the Hebrew uses word here to cross over. That's the verb that's being used. The very word from which we get the word ivri, by the way. You're going to cross over into the covenant. And perhaps the Torah uses this pictorial language because they're actually literally about to cross over Jordan. And that's a word picture that's so powerful. So then the covenant that Hashem God, he continues, koret imcha ayom, he's cutting with you today. Another interesting phrase. You know, in the Torah, the covenants, they're not made, they're cut. God is cutting a covenant. And this is not something on the surface. Just give it a moment of thought. With cutting, my friends, blood is involved. That's what's going on here. Moshe continues. He says, Leman hakimotcha ayom lo la'am. In order to establish today you, and here is the singular masculine switch. He's speaking to them in plural you. And then all of a sudden, right here, he switches to a singular you as his people. In order to establish you, singular, as his people. Then Moshe explains further that Hashem will be God. It says, Kasher nishba levotecha, he swore to your fathers, singular again, to your fathers, singular you. And after that, Moshe basically talks about, he returns right back to the plural pronouns, back to masculine you, which is a normal way to address a group of people in Hebrew. So I thought this was peculiar, this little switch that happened in the middle of the speech. All of a sudden, he switches from plural to singular you. So I kept reading, just paying attention to little things like that, like pronouns, trying to understand why. Next, Moshe informs the multitude that the covenant is not with them alone. Interesting words. He says, V'lo etchem levadchem. It's not with you alone. But it is with those who are absent, actually. It is with those who are not even standing there. Isn't that a strange proclamation? You know, this agreement I'm making, it's not just with you, it's even with those people who are not here in the room right now. Well, how do you do that? You see, apparently, the borders of the covenant that Hashem is cutting are very broad. They stretch across generations, across families, even to those who are not standing in front of Moses right just then. And Moshe stresses that this covenant, essentially, it's communal, yet it is very personal. And that's why the switches, I think, between the plural and the singular, which is why I think the pronouns are changing here. Even though he's addressing a crowd the whole time, he speaks as if he's speaking to one person. Now, I want you to think for a second, when God made promises to Abraham, was he surrounded by all his descendants? No. Isaac, Jacob, the same story. They were actually, a lot of times, alone, just by themselves, when Hashem appeared to them and spoke to them. On the day that the children of Israel are now standing in front of Moshe and listening to these words, they're joined to those words of promise that were spoken to a single person, perhaps, in private. Yet they are a party of that promise now, all together as a community. You see, this is how it works. This is how promises get lived out. They're benefiting from God keeping his promises that he made. This covenant right here is a fulfillment of an early promise. Now, I took you on a little journey with me in Hebrew, I realized, because I really wanted you to see the understanding of what happens when pronouns in Hebrew switch, and you can only see this in original text, which is why I have to take you on these little Hebrew aside journeys with me. I believe that the only way to truly understand what this passage teaches us for today, how it speaks to us, is to look in the original. And that's what I do, and that's how these things come to me. So I have a couple of principles that I wanted to share with you today that I read that I think Hashem may be saying to some of you here sitting in this room. First one is this. Your faith is not yours alone. It cannot be authentically lived out this way. Think about it. Your faith is not yours alone. You cannot live it by yourself. When the first covenant was cut, Avram, he was alone. And those who came later, his descendants, they were simply included in this promise. And he says that he believed Hashem, and Hashem called that belief, that faith, righteousness. That's what we read in the Torah. Now, in the book of Devarim, we have a diverse crowd, a big crowd that stands in front of Moshe, even sojourners who join themselves to Israel and to the sons of Jacob. And they are all addressed as a singular you, as if we're back to the moment of Abraham receiving the promise once again. They are established. They are set up. I think the translation we're reading today is they're confirmed. It's an interesting choice of words. As a single people in one covenant. Now, individual and corporate identities are intertwined. That's what makes this berit, that makes this promise, that's what makes the relationship with the God of Israel so unusual. For Israel, individual spiritual experiences and personal revelations do not define the walk of the community of the covenant. I realize people have all sorts of interesting things that happen to them, but they don't usually define the work of our community. It's our joint experience of God as the people, standing at the foot of Mount Sinai and hearing God's voice speak to all of us simultaneously. Those are the experiences upon which we build our walk of faith. That's the moments expressed in the singular you while we experience God together. Being a part of a covenant means being a part of a community. And that means engaging with everyone who was mentioned right here by Moshe, these diverse people, even those who later, at some point later, even join the crowd. We don't even know who's going to be entering into this covenant with us. That's exciting. That's my first point, is that your faith is not yours alone, and it cannot be authentically lived out that way. My second point is related. Your faith is not yours, and it's not automatic. You must enter into the covenant. You know, family relationships, we could see them pretty much kind of like automatic. We're born, and we belong to a family. You don't get a choice, right? You're just born into it. Nobody asked you. You're born. But relationship with God, it's not like that. We're not born into the covenant. Well, maybe, but not literally. We can be born into a promise. I'll give you an illustration. Every Jew, every descendant of Abraham, is born into a promise. And that promise belongs to him by right of birth. On the 8th day, every Jewish boy receives a sign of that promise, a reminder. Now, but the promise has to become a reality, my friends. It is not a reality until something happens in that person's life. And that circumcised boy may choose a different path in life, a path without Hashem. So guess what? The promise has not materialized. It remains just a promise. That's not exactly a relationship with God. It's not automatic. Torah says that besides our flesh being circumcised, our hearts may be circumcised. Sometimes I share this with my Christian friends and they're surprised because they thought that was all in the New Testament. And I tell them that no, it's right there in Torah. Circumcise your hearts, says Moshe. Thus what happens, we enter into a life with a promise. But later, we must enter into a relationship with God, into a covenant with God. And that requires an action on our part. It's not a passive sailing into it. It doesn't happen that way. It's not automatic. That's why I say that your faith is not yours, and it's not automatic. It is communal, and it is part of this covenant arrangement. Now, on one occasion, I remember Yeshua, he described this experience as being born from above. Remember those words? Well, you know, actually, I don't think it's like birth. I would say it's more like getting married, actually. Yeshua also taught, by the way, about entering the kingdom of heaven, which he compared to a wedding feast. I like that one better because I think it gets us there better. See, these examples from Yeshua, from our teacher, really help us to understand. They illustrate that the truth, that to be with God truly, one must cling to Hashem on the personal level. We must enter into that relationship on the personal level. And then we gain that status of belonging to the people who made the same choice on a communal level. So that's what I mean, that your faith is not yours and it's not automatic. You must enter the covenant. Or say it in other words, that you must be born from above, however you wish. The message is consistent. The message is the same. And I hope that all those of us who are here listening to these words of the Torah, we have entered the covenant, and that's why we're here today.